this morning. Now let's go straight to the interview segment. And on Frontline this morning, we turn our focus to a development that could redefine Nigeria electoral landscape. In a bold move, the National Assembly has proposed shifting the country's next presidential and governorship election to November 2026, 6 months earlier than the traditional February-March scheduled. And the proposed amendments to the Electoral Act Reform 2022 aims to ensure that all election petitions are concluded before the inauguration of new leaders on May 29, 2027. And it also seeks to empower INEC to conduct all major elections, presidential, governorship, and legislative on a single day, potentially saving costs and also reducing costs post-election tensions. So this has generated a lot of reactions and controversies from different quarters, particularly from the opposition. So joining us this morning to look at this extensively is Amuda Musigodi, a public and political affairs analyst, as we looked at the proposed 2026 November election. It's good to have you joining us this morning.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, so let's begin to talk about the overall impression. So what do you make of all this proposal of the November 2026 general election?
I think it's important that we take a trajectory of election and, election history in Nigeria. And you notice that before now, what we often have was that elections, particularly in the life of from the Third Republic up to the Fourth Republic that we are in now, elections are often conducted, particularly presidential elections and state elections are conducted on different days. And the idea behind that is to allow INEC now, or INEC as it were. And there was a reason for it. And the reason is because then what we had was manual collation. And in the age of manual collation, if you conduct all the elections in a day, then it's going to lead to a lot of muddling up and a lot of other bottlenecks. But now that we're getting digitalized, where for every result, you can know your result at the level of the polling booth, and even before you get to, the rack, the collation center, eventually, you can tell the results of your ward, you can tell the results of your local government, you can tell the results of your state, and even before INEC officially declares. And so, it makes it a lot easier. And in the light of that, there is nothing, stopping us from having all elections in a day. Because like I said earlier, all we need to understand, if you want to know whether something is workable, practicable, we need to look at what led to this process. The reason why we had elections in on different dates was because of the fact that what we had was handling papers and all that. So you need to do some sorting at the collation center. I've been a returning officer several times, and of course I've monitored the elections too several times. And you have to sort at the level of rack. Oh no, this result ought not to have been collated. No, okay. So all that is being gradually phased out. And if it is phased out, there is nothing stopping us from having all the elections in a day. Now, and if you also look at the proposal of, we should have elections 6 months before handing over, it's been a major issue. How do you conduct an election? Someone or an imposter is sworn in. The imposter enjoys the benefits of governance until he's booted out, and there are no consequences for it. So if I have rightfully won an election, I am denied that seat until much later. And that's why we now have in Nigeria, we have off-cycle elections, and we have on-cycle elections, because it's because of this. But if we have a situation where elections are conducted months before we are proper handing over, it will save us. Now let's look at how we are fed. Initially it used to be April. Elections used to be April, and then swearing in will be in May. But then we decided, okay, let's shift the elections to February. And we still discovered that more often than not, a lot of the tribunals, election tribunals, do not dispense with justice until after swearing in had taken place. So it gives a picture of, we need more time. Okay. And beyond the whole 6 months, we need to also look at why do we need, or why are we in this kind of quagmire? Number one is we need to reduce the level of brigandage that our elections witness. We also need to reduce the technical glitches that, you know, the election umpire also faces. In the last election, for instance, INEC and of course INEC officials, the POs and all that, some of them did not have access to internet.
Polling officers.
And yes, polling officers, they didn't have access to internet, and it took electorate to share hotspots with them. I saw some in Lagos, for instance, where people were the ones sharing hotspots. We also saw where there was wrong uploading. Some were uploading their pictures instead of the results of the polling unit. So these are issues, and when this is not done, and for instance, we talk about the IREV, and we talk about the BVAS. Now, one would expect that with the BVAS and of course the IRF scheme, all you need to do is upload, and it's just a natural thing. As you upload the results, all that is needed is computation takes place immediately. So there is nothing, if we were using the IRF properly, there is nothing that stops us from having results out in less than 12 hours. After elections had been conducted. Okay. Because if you have all your results updated already, okay, all you need to do, it's an Excel work. Okay, you have updated, okay, for AD, this is total number of votes. And then it takes, you have logged it in for AD. Then it computes all that has been logged in for AD across the different. What you now need to do is, okay, this is the result that we have. The parties would have also done their own collation, because parties also have, a collation center where, okay, they bring you results and then they do calculations. Okay, no, there is something is wrong here. So you still go to your, your respective racks, the local government collation center, check the results against what the party agents have. What was snapped or what was posted at the level of the polling unit. Okay, there are no errors, and then all these can be concluded within 48 hours. Whatever glitches, there is a point of error here, that means this person, because again, if you are going to upload a result as a polling officer, the polling the returning or the agents of the parties must see it. They must see what you're uploading, so it saves us a lot of drama. Okay. So there is nothing stopping us from having, all the elections in one day, and to save us that unnecessary funds. I feel that it's not just a one-way thing; it's a two-way thing. We can decide to have our elections conducted, 6 months into the election, but if we are doing that, this is already October. Okay, this is already October 2025. So it means that the parties only have a year and a month to the election, which I do not think gives them enough time. Exactly. Okay, because even campaign, ban has not been lifted. So we are looking at, by January next year, parties will begin to, those who are going to be contesting will begin to officially declare their candidature. And so by April, May, June, parties would have concluded primaries. So they will not have enough time to campaign. More so, some of these parties have internal rank lists. So they will not have been able to deal with a lot of these internal rank lists, and it will not favor them. It will not be to their favor. So
we can say that the intentions are genuine and valid, but looking at it and looking at the reactions that this whole thing has generated, it seems that it's politically motivated.
It may not necessarily be politically motivated. It's what we have been saying. In fact, I know that civil society organizations have been making this noise that there should be no reason why a person should be sworn in when there are litigations in court. So, and don't forget that the process is that you go to election tribunals for governorship, for instance, and then it terminates at the Court of Appeal. Okay? So by the time you begin to move on, before it gets to the final arbiter, the person has spent maybe 3 months or 4 months in office already. So even if you have a change, let's say that in some cases it's possible that the tribunal or the court may obtain the election. They can, cancel that election and call for fresh elections. Yeah. So it means all of that, there will not be ample time to carry out all of this. So I do not feel that it's politically motivated to say that we should have elections in November. The only problem is the timing. It should have come, if we want to do it, if we were sincere about this, this should have come much earlier than now.
Okay, now let's talk about the judiciary system. Thank God you mentioned that we have some litigation that can also linger for more than 6 months. So do you think our judicial system is prepared enough to take care of every issues arising from elections for within the space of 6 months before the swearing in and the inauguration?
You see, the question is a very complex one. A complex one in the sense that if you understand the burden, okay, that the election tribunals and election litigation comes with, then, and of course, how civil litigations are carried out, one would understand why sometimes it takes a longer process. Now, don't forget that for a civil litigation, you file in your prayers, and then all preliminary issues also come up, and after preliminary issues, now what we can do is maybe we can have a reform of our judicial system such that every hearing, every preliminary hearing can take place in a day, and then decisions, because again, there are sometimes that issues of local standard will come up. And this would, drag before the court is able to dispense with that, or that another issue will come up, and a lot of you see parties, seeking some funny injunctions here and there, seeking some interlocutory injunctions that would obviously stall the progress of it. So we can have a time lag and say, okay, every of the courts that are sitting should not sit for more than 3 months. Okay, every court of first instance should not hear the matter for more than a month. So you can hear a matter back to back. It is not impossible. It's just that it will be strenuous because, again, judgments are not just delivered anyhow. The judge would have to listen to the arguments of the parties and then make his own position before he can give what is the ratio decidendi, of his judgment, is the reason why he's reaching that judgment. So it's not always an easy call. The judge would also have to be careful not to be given a judgment per incuriam out of obliviousness of certain basic provisions of the law. So these are the issues that will come up. And when you have election tribunals, in fact, it's even worse in our own climate, because if you imagine the number of election litigations that come up post-election, then you understand why it can be quite cumbersome.
Yeah.
Okay, so in a state, for instance, you're having litigations of almost, say, about 10 to 15. That's the least you would have. You see litigations, arising from matters, surrounding House of Assembly elections, litigations surrounding matters around House of Rep elections, litigations, on matters surrounding Senate election, litigation surrounding governorship election, litigation surrounding,
Assembly,
presidential election, and so on. So by the time you look at it, the judges are often overstretched. And don't forget that these judges also have some pending matters, non-election matters they are also attending to in their respective courts. So we can look for a way around it to expedite all of this. We need reforms, no doubt. Thank God that our courts no longer have to dwell on, the judge writing and writing. There is a place of transcription. As you are speaking, there is a transcribing machine that is, ongoing and all of that. There is also nothing stopping us from also adopting, the virtual courts, which has been adopted anyways. Some jurisdiction, you see some jurisdiction use it. For instance, I know that Oyo State has one, Lagos State also has one, because we did that during COVID.
Yeah.
Okay, matters were being heard, by the courts during COVID virtually. So we can also have situations like that. But the long and short of it is, the NJC needs to, sit itself down and ask very valid questions. Is it possible to dispense with judgment, within the framework that is given? And when I say dispense judgment, that is up to the apex court that hears that matter. In cases where the matter terminates at the Court of Appeal, and of course in cases where it terminates at the Supreme Court, can we have a situation where all those matters are clear and cleared and heard of? More so, the place of INEC would also matter in all of this. INEC is largely the reason why a lot of people go to court. And so if INEC is fair enough, you see that in some states, the losers do not even bother to go to any litigation. For instance, in the 2019 and 2023 elections in Oyo State, those who lost the election, the governorship election, did not bother to go to any tribunal because it was clear. The process was fair enough. Okay? But when the process is not fair, you would always see litigation. So if INEC does its own best to ensure that as much as possible, it gives a fair ground, a very fair and just ground that allows the elections to run smoothly and without rancor, you would see that the number of litigations will reduce and we may not need that 6 months that we're clamoring for.
Okay, the proposal also suggests having the governorship, presidential election and legislative election in a single day. So do you think this is visible in a country that is as large and complex like Nigeria?
Like I said earlier, the reason why we had those elections on 2 different days is not because people were not smart. All you need to do is you get your ballot paper for presidential, right? You get ballot paper for governorship. You get your ballot paper for Senate, you get for Rep, and then you get for House of Assembly. 5. The reason we had elections on 2 different days was for the sake and comfort of the electoral umpire. Not because the people were dumb. In fact, most times you see that people have a voting pattern. It's same along the line. Yes, there could be an effect because again, if you also look at the place of voter education in Nigeria, it's very low. And so some parties may be at the losing end. If I'm voting for, say, I'm voting for Peter Obi, let's say of the Labour Party for president, there is a high tendency that I will, because I don't want to get confused, I will vote across boards like that.
For that party? For
that party. Which means that if I intend to vote for another candidate earlier, because I get confused at all of this, okay? So what we can do is, which is one of the parts of voter education, unfortunately our National Orientation Agency is nowhere to be found. One of the things we can do in this case is where people are given, you give them each ballot. Take this ballot, go and vote. This is for presidency. After you have cast your vote, this is the one for, we can even do it that, okay, this is presidency, Senate, and House of Rep. Take this. They go cast their votes. And then after they return, you give them for the State of House of Assembly. Don't forget that there are going to be security officials there. So in the case of someone stealing a vote, will not count. All we need to do is ensure internal vigilance. So it's not impossible. But where you have, a large voter, lack of voter education as we have in Nigeria, where a lot of those who are voting are not that educated, there is a possibility for, the problem of choice to be muddled up. I have 5 things to vote for. I don't even know which one is president. They told me, but I've forgotten. And so I just pick the president, and if I'm doing a Milocon, for instance, and then I just, I'll just vote it round. But then I intend to vote for someone else for governor. Yeah. So some parties will averse from it. Let me give you an example. A friend of mine contested for the governorship ticket in 2019. And then, he came out and said, he had more votes than a certain candidate. A certain female candidate who was the most popular female candidate, then in 2019. That he had more votes than him. And that meant that he was popular. And I said, Awe, you are not popular. What happened was your party, was, I think, PRP or something. So those who wanted to vote for PDP, were confused and they voted your party. So you are vested from, and that's where we now begin to also look at, maybe we also need to reform the whole idea of names. Because we know that in branding, for instance, the only reason why you do not allow 2 products to have the same name, is because of that consumer confusion that you create. And the problem of choice that you create for consumer. So one is, my product is Lolo Vita. And then someone calls his own Lola Vita. So when I say Lola Vita, I don't even bother to check. And one thing about the human mind. Yes, one thing about the human mind is oftentimes our conclusions are based on the first interaction, the first contact. And that's why, they often say that, the first impression lasts longest. So so I just say low and I assume it is Lolo. Not knowing that there is an A. And you see that, you know, when even brands do that very well. So they bring a product and the same color. So you want to buy margarine, for instance, all the margarines are the same color. And then you wonder in your head, well, is it that margarines have a special color? But then the color of the container is same. It is because they want you to, you know, always think like this is your preferred, you know, beverage or your preferred margarine that you're buying. So it's one of the things that we can deal with. And what that means is that we need to embark on intensive voter education. Yeah. Okay? Throw samples around. This is for presidency. If I can do it in such a way that all ballot papers of, let's say, the national elections would have a same size, while all ballot papers of state elections would have same size. With that, we can help the voters identify which
one is presidential
is from the other, so that they can, and then the party agent also have a role to play, to say that, oh, this is it. Now,
so
basically,
sensitize them at the point of voting.
Sensitization is key. Yeah. The parties will need to do serious sensitization to say that, no, this is not our logo if you see it. In fact, one thing that you can do is beyond, you can have even pictures. Unfortunately, the court has said that not having the picture of a candidate, you know, on a ballot paper doesn't necessarily, you know, affect the results of the election. That because what you vote for are political parties and not candidates. But then having the picture of a candidate on the ballot paper goes a long way too. So I want to vote for a man who wears red cap, and his cap is always, you know, protruded to the front. So as soon as I see him, all I need to do is look
the party.
All I need to look for is the image. Yeah. Okay? But I understand that INEC is also trying to cut costs. But that would have gone a long way to save those who are going to vote. Don't also forget that it's a fundamental right of the citizens to ensure that they vote for the man of their choice without any sense of confusion. And the duty of the state it is to provide that platform that removes all those forms of, you know, confusion in the minds of the electorate. So the long and short of it is we need intense and intensive voter education and sensitization.
Exactly. And if this bill passes, what do you think? How do you think it's going to affect the primary structure, the campaign structure, and even the election?
Well, if this sails through, well, the implication would be that they would also have to shift backwards. INEC would have to shift backwards his timetable as regards election. So saying that campaign should not start until maybe February next year may not work. INEC would have to shift backwards. That's one. Two is that it would also mean that INEC has to cut a lot of costs. And three is that INEC would need to do intensive training for the personnel it's going to use. Because one of the problems we had in the last election was a situation where someone who was not trained, in fact, I interacted with a lot of the police officers, and I saw a couple of them who were never trained. They were never trained, so they don't understand the intricacies of this. Someone who was not trained, you know, was eventually picked as a polling officer. He got a text, I think 2 days on Thursday night. That was 2 days before the election. So there was no proper training. So if the INEC is going to do recruitment, they should have done the recruitment and make sure that 3 months into the election, at least once a month or, you know, maybe bi-weekly, INEC can always conduct trainings.
For their personnel.
And trainings. Because, you know, even in the business world, there's something we call CPE. Okay? Continuous, you know, practical education. Because you need to brush up. They need to brush up and be at par with the standard that INEC is taking, you know, the whole electionary process. So that's important. And I believe that this new INEC chairman may want to perform those wonders that we are seeking.
So just to go back to the judicial system, some legal experts have also argued that this could put pressure on the court and could lead to rushed judgments.
Yeah, definitely. Like I mentioned that earlier, that the whole burden of some of these judgments, you know, it's always funny for me when I see people say, oh, the judgment is, and I say, have you read a copy of judgment? And you discover that sometimes those judgments are not less than 40 pages. There are judgments of 50 pages. because you have to look at all the arguments of the parties. The judgment will first state the arguments of the parties, and then the judge will now begin to state his own argument and then give a verdict and build it like, you know, like an essay. Is building a body of a system of knowledge. So it gives premises for it and then finally arrives at a conclusion. It is not something that is, you know, it's not a walk in the park. That's why one of the sterling qualities of a judge, okay, is comprehension and ability to flow easily, writing ability. These are some of the issues that we have to take note of.
So in your view, what reform would you say is most critical in Nigeria if we really truly want to strengthen the credibility and the efficiency of our elections in Nigeria?
I think the first thing is we have to start with this whole terrible idea of having the president appoint the INEC chairman. Exactly. You see, unfortunately, we run a system where we forget that he who pays the piper, okay, calls the tune. If I have appointed, you know, the INEC chairman, it means that the INEC chairman is answerable to me, and this is a major problem. Now, where you have an INEC chairman, there is nothing stopping us from having an INEC chairman suggested by civil society organizations. Unfortunately, our civil society organizations have also sold over. But then we can have CSOs, okay, and then you can have suggestions from CSOs, suggestions from, say, retired generals, suggestions from senior citizens. And then whatever suggestion each one has given can be asked to be counter-checked by the others. And then they can all come to an agreement and say, okay, we have made a concession that this person is better. Having looked at his CV, having looked at his track records and all that, that this person will do the job more. Now, if that is done, that all the National Assembly needs to do then is just to ratify. Unlike where we have a situation where the president, Mr. President, picks who the INEC chairman and who the INEC chairman will be, and then sends the name to the National Assembly. That is not the right way to go about it. We need an INEC chairman that will be impartial, not just seen to be impartial.
And truly independent.
Exactly. So not one that the president can call from the corner of his bedroom and say that this is what I want. So we need that. Then two also is that we need a judicial system that is really fair, not corrupt, and fast with the dispensement of justice. Because in the last election, many of the court cases, many of the election indications I saw were lost because these judges, some of them were demanding monetary favors. And you cannot demand monetary favor from the devil and expect that he will let you go scot-free. So when they seek monetary favors, just recently, Mr. Nyesom Wike said he was building houses for judges. And in my head, I'm like, why should you have to build houses for judges? Is that not a way of buying over their trust? If you bought a house for me and then they bring a matter about you before my court, you can be sure that my sentiments will rise. So these are some of the, the issues that we have to look at. Then the third one is also the place of what I call election monitoring and election conduction. And that is where our police will come in. It's quite unfortunate that in Nigeria, where level of brigandage is at this level, we would expect a level of more professionalism from the police. Now, there is what we call the concentric points of election. That is that election polling units. But there is also the outer section or the concentric section, which deals with, if thugs are going to come. If thugs are going to come into an election polling booth, what they will do is they will come from somewhere. The duty of the police in that regard is to stop them from getting to the polling booth. So where you have state-sponsored thugs moving around in state-branded vehicles, where you have thugs doing the biddings of politicians, it becomes a lot difficult to track it. So we need a system where the police will be up and doing and ensure that justice is duly served. There is the Electoral Act, and whoever flouts that Electoral Act should be duly punished. We cannot keep going around the circle and say, oh, this and that. And more so, there is also a need for increased voter education. We can't run away from that. If we really want, this to sail through and not have negative effects, we need voter reorientation, education, and mobilization.
The proposal also suggests the non-mandatory PVC. So, and for some quarter, it seems that this is going to drive us to that era where we have to go back to people just coming to polling units without the PVC, at where we thought that we've passed that era. So what do you make of this particular development if the bill scales through?
You know, for me, it's funny when we say that, okay, we are going back to those days when somebody is a digital age. There are offices today that you cannot gain entrance if your face is not properly scanned. You can't gain entry. So INEC did a capturing of the tongue. If INEC did not do, they can liaise with service providers.
Why are we even having that suggestion?
No, it's not a bad thing, really. It's not a bad thing. But we can, you know, liaise. We need, it's not a bad thing because, oh, that's how we have been doing it. But as the world is moving and evolving.
Because everyone cannot get the PVC.
As the world is moving and evolving, we can continue to do that. We can also begin to evolve. So everyone cannot get a PVC, no doubt. In fact, there are times where your PVC would have gotten lost. And genuinely, it is lost. And you want to vote. So you are going to be disenfranchised because you lost your voter's card. INEC has a fingerprint. All they need to do is you put your thumb, and if the wrong person appears, try it either with the index finger, okay, or the middle finger, or the middle finger. And when you try all of this, you'll be able to get the database of that person and confirm that the person is a valid voter. With that, we would have reduced the bottleneck, you know, that comes with election conduction in Nigeria.
All right, I want to say a big thank you to my guest on the show this morning as we look at the proposed November 2026 election, in which probably before December it's going to be passed. And I think what matters the most is how this is going to enhance credibility of elections for Nigerians, when Nigerians can boast of a credible, free and fair elections. Whatever suggestions that is in the proposal, what matters most is Nigerians want their vote to count. And today, the INEC chairman will be screened at the Senate today. Okay, let me ask you your word for Professor Amupitan. He's going to be screened.
Well, I don't expect less. Okay. For a professor of that, you know, that status, and his son for that matter, I hope that it will be bringing a new lease of life into INEC compared to what we had under Professor Mahmood. Mahmood had his colored days. But then there were also days of gloom as regards how the election was conducted. But I expect more. I expect that Amupitan will introduce some reforms into INEC. I expect him to introduce some reforms into INEC for better service delivery to the people.
Yeah, a lot of expectations from Nigeria, and we just hope that the Professor Amupitan will do due diligence to the electoral system of the country, where Nigerians can have confidence in our electoral system again. Once again, I want to say a big thank you to Amuda Musibodi for your time on the show this morning. We'll see you again tomorrow by God's grace. Until then, do have a wonderful day. I am Temitope Oladipo. Good morning.